Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online. News that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Johnny Coker. In today's episode, we'll be talking to local officials and other stakeholders about legislation that would address issues surrounding food insecurity in the country. But first, let's take a look at what's happening in southern New Mexico to address poverty and food deserts. I have more in this report. With the rising cost of living, the demand for food pantries in southern New Mexico is continuing to grow. For individuals like Nathaniel Ramirez who live paycheck to paycheck, a small increase could mean the difference between paying rent and being able to eat.
Minimum wage is not just not enough these days. For most Americans are working like all day, all night just to try to make a decent living for their family, man. You know, so you got rent, and the rent costs gone up around here, so a lot of things have gone up, especially if you're not getting food stamps, or if you're not getting benefits, or if you work and you're not getting enough money. The food here definitely helps out.
For Nathaniel, programs like the Casa de Peregrinos food pantry have helped him get back on his feet.
It definitely helps out when you have a resource to come get food and stuff, like, because some people don't get they don't get food stamps and they don't get all that stuff. So I have to pay cash for my food, and so I really kind of like just live frugal living, until things get better.
Food insecurity in New Mexico stands higher than the national average, making food programs valuable for citizens struggling with the cost of living. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, food prices are nearly 6% higher now compared to June of last year. According to Becky Pearson, head of NMSU's Department of Public Health Science, remedying food insecurity has long-lasting societal implications, but finding the right approach to address the issue can be difficult.
This is a really complex issue. It is so much more than dollars and cents. It is so much more than haves and have-nots. It is so much more than looking at someone else's basket and thinking, gosh, they're not doing well, or looking at their weight and thinking, oh, they must be fine. But the economics of it are what people will buy into, right? And what people will go, oh, I am sold, right? If we can talk about the expenses saved with prevention, that really helps.
Pearson said that while conventional food assistance is helpful, attempting different strategies, such as educational programs, could also be a big step in fighting food insecurity.
Everyone is in need somehow around food. And so if I had my druthers, if there was anything that I could help work toward here, it would be to help people understand the need for and the beauty of and the practicality and the ease of doing community-based food stuff that is in addition to traditionally understood food assistance.
And that's just what Casa de Peregrinos is hoping for with the opening of their new facility. In addition to the expanded assistance in distribution, the pantry is eyeing food education programs moving forward. Director of Casa de Peregrinos, Lorenzo Alba Jr., said that the new facility belongs to the citizens who need the help.
Nutrition is important. You don't just want to give people food if they don't know what to do with it. If they don't know what to do with an eggplant, we should show them how to cook it in a way that's maybe culturally good for our community. This is about this community. That's why we built it. We intend to do much more, but this is a beginning of our vision. The pandemic really opened our eyes to the lack of infrastructure here in our area, in our state. And again, if we can address it at least in Las Cruces and Doña Ana County, let's take care of our people here, the people that are really going through difficult times.
The new facility is years in the making, built with the assistance of public funds from the city and state. According to Alba, the pantry's old facility was only meant to distribute about 500,000 pounds of food per year. Alba said that the pantry distributes 500,000 pounds in a month and a half, and with the new facility, the pantry's team will be able to store more fresh food and meet demands much more efficiently.
We've had to say no a lot to donations from farmers because we don't have the space to store it anywhere. Now we don't have to say no. The capacity that we've built with this facility will allow us to do as much as we can. Given the funding opportunities for us, if we have it, we'll try to expand services. Now we have a facility where we can actually do that out of.
As for Nathaniel Ramirez, he hopes that with the expansion of the food pantry, others can have similar experiences as him.
Man, it helped me out a bunch. As far as food, living, this place pretty much has all the resources that you need to have to get you back up and going, if that's what you want.
As the cost of living continues to rise for Americans, stakeholders in Las Cruces are hoping that Casa de Peregrinos can help address the social and economic struggles of local residents, and along with other organizations, act as a safety net for the most vulnerable in the community. Now joining me is the U.S. Representative for New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District, Gabe Vasquez. Congressman Vasquez, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Johnny. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So let's just get right into it. What are your main objectives for the 2023 Farm Bill?
Well, Johnny, since being elected to this position, being on the Agriculture Committee was one of my priorities, specifically because I got to work on the Farm Bill, which, every 5 years Congress authorizes and provides so much support, not just to farmers and ranchers, but truly to all of our families and our agricultural network across the country. So my priorities are, number one, ensuring that we keep food assistance well-funded and supporting New Mexican families. Those are programs like SNAP and TFAP that help support organizations like Roadrunner Food Bank and Casa de Peregrinos. It's also to ensure that we have voluntary conservation programs that have helped farmers and ranchers really be the true stewards of the lands that they graze their cattle on or that they grow their crops on. And so that's really important to me as well. And then, we are talking about some innovations in agriculture as well, and some bills I've introduced to help support things like virtual fencing for cattle, so that we can, really take agriculture and in particular cattle grazing into the next generation. Those are some of my priorities, but more than anything, ensuring that both our farmers and ranchers are taken care of, but our agricultural workers are also being paid fair wages, that they are being part of our economy in a way that is fair to them, and that we also help support these food assistance programs that are so critical to New Mexicans.
This is such a big, all-encompassing bill. So as a lawmaker, how do you balance the needs of farmers, the environment, consumers, and other stakeholders? How do you sort of find a balance there?
Yeah, well, I sit on the conservation and forestry subcommittees within the Agriculture Committee, and so within all the titles that USDA manages under the Farm Bill, there's really something in it for everybody in New Mexico. Again, whether you're one of the recipients of a food assistance program, whether you're a farmer or a rancher that is switching over from, let's say, windmills to solar panels, and you're getting subsidized to do that, or you're a young farmer in places like the South Valley or Chamberino, you have support from the Farm Bill to help essentially, be able to be successful in a drought-stricken state like New Mexico. So I think those priorities are the most important to me, is what parts of the Farm Bill specifically apply to the challenges that we face in the 2nd District in New Mexico. And this can be from folks, as far as Hidalgo County, all the way up to Bernalillo County, and down to the colonias in southern Doña Ana County. Every farmer, every agricultural producer has a different need. And then we talk about the supply chain of agriculture and what that means as well for our economy. So it's not just about the production value, but it's also about how you actually get things to market. And so funding grants for transportation, funding grants for cold storage, funding grants for co-ops so that small farmers can collectively sell their products. All this stuff is in the Farm Bill. And so I'm looking for every provision in the Farm Bill that directly impacts my district. And those are the things that I'm really focusing on.
So as the Southwest is in a drought and dealing with record high temperatures, or has been, do you anticipate addressing water rights and water conservation within New Mexico borders in this piece of legislation? Is that something that's on the table?
Absolutely. When we talk about smarter water-wise agricultural practices and the improvements that are funded through the Farm Bill in the forms of grants like EKIP and others, when we help promote things like drip irrigation and we help conserve both our surface and our well water, we are essentially extending the life of farming and ranching, and also water availability in this country and in this district. And so all those small grants, all add up when you have, hopefully hundreds of producers all signing up to use water more efficiently and effectively. There's bigger water issues at play in this district. We have to look at what Texas v. New Mexico and the implications of water use, in particular downstream of Elephant Butte within the Elephant Butte Irrigation District, the impacts that lawsuit and that decision will have, potentially that settlement will have. And then also, we really have to understand the nature of water contamination especially in our aquifers. And so that's something I've worked on in the Armed Services Committee to better understand and look at the PFAS contamination that has created some plumes that we probably still don't know about under some of our military installations. That also impacts the ability for us to recharge those aquifers and then to draw out that water for agricultural purposes. So it's a whole network of I think, jurisdictions and committees that go into water security in New Mexico, but the Farm Bill in particular helps, those 90% of water users for irrigation in the district that take up the majority and the bulk of our surface water, and those are our farmers down south. So these programs are critically important.
So, Congressman, you mentioned, earlier in the conversation how you want to, get the next generation of farmers and ranchers, or you want to be a part of that effort to help the next generation of farmers and ranchers. And with the Mesilla Valley being such a big agricultural area and New Mexico State University in the area, how will the bill incentivize or encourage this next generation of farmers?
That's a great question. Well, recently we just, we visited with a couple of different organizations across the district, young farmers in New Mexico, both in the South Valley of Albuquerque, as well as down south in Doña Ana County, who have expressed to us some of the challenges that they face in essentially producing local crops for schools, for local businesses, for farmers market. Part of that is access to credit. And so the Farm Service Administration, which is the main government entity that provides access to credit, I think has some pretty rigid restrictions on who can actually have access, and that also is limited to who actually owns the land, right? Many of our young farmers today are leasing plots of land in places in southern Doña Ana County where they should be the owners, and they should have that opportunity to have access to credit, because you can't apply for the federal grants unless you are the landowner. And so what we want to do is turn more young farmers into young farm owners. And that means that they have access then to the federal grants and the federal funding system that allows them to make the improvements that they need to be successful, as well as some of these value-added product grants that USDA provides. So that's the goal, I think, is to empower young people to be able to own their own plots of land, to be able to farm and grow their operation, if that's what they'd like, by building a successful business and then opening up markets. Now, technical assistance is a huge part of that, which USDA grants also offer, because you can be really good at growing a particular crop, but marketing it and actually selling it and making profit from it is also a challenge. And so, we've seen folks with new innovative businesses like a mushroom company down in the old Stahman Farms ice cream shop that folks might remember is now a fully operational commercial growing mushroom commercial operation that sells to El Paso restaurants, for example. And they need the support to be able to expand that business and have the technical assistance to do that. So I think my focus in terms of making sure young people can succeed in this industry is first that they have to own the land, have access to credit, and then empower them, they can be empowered then to own their own businesses.
With the rising cost of living, especially in southern New Mexico and in your district, the demand for food pantries has only continued to grow. So in your mind, what's the best way to address this, and what's the best way to address poverty in general to help people get back on their feet?
Well, I said this in a committee to officials from the USDA and to my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle, is that hungry kids can't learn and that hungry families can't thrive. First and foremost, we need to make sure that as a building block of health and an opportunity for New Mexicans, we need to put food on the table. And oftentimes that's hard to do. We are prideful people, we are prideful families. And when we are just oftentimes one paycheck away from bankruptcy or not being able to go to the grocery store, We rely on programs like TFAP and on SNAP to put food on the table. And so I think it's just critical that not only for the families, but also for those producers. If you think about the folks who are actually contributing to those programs are local growers themselves. And so they're actually supporting this program with local produce, which is really important. But food assistance is really the cornerstone of building a healthy society. And the hope, and I think the purpose of food assistance is that when you provide those building blocks, when you free up an opportunity for a family not to worry about food on the table, they can then pursue other economic goals that eventually lead them to be disenrolled or to automatically disenroll from a program where they can now be self-sustainable economically. But the challenges are great. Inflation is something I'm looking at continuously. The cost of everything from even buying a used car, of course, to the rising cost of rent, to health insurance. It's all very tough right now for our families. And so food assistance is one of those basic foundational building blocks that we can provide as a federal government to help support those families to get back into the middle class.
Gabe Vasquez is the representative for New Mexico's 2nd District. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. And now moving on, the rising cost of living has made it difficult for many New Mexicans to put food on the table. One of the ways that the state is addressing this is through food assistance programs. To talk with me about this and other related issues is Roadrunner Food Bank's Shelby Koza. Shelby, thanks so much for being here.
Sure, thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So basically, can you just tell us what Roadrunner Food Bank does in our region and what your role is here?
Sure. So Roadrunner Food Bank is mainly the warehousing facility and organization that provides food through various donors throughout the nation and the state to our partners all across the state as well. So we essentially act as a distribution center for our 16 county direct service area, as well as the affiliates that we have in the northern part of the state. So in this region specifically, we're distributing to places like Casa de Peregrinos, El Caldito, the various schools and seniors sites, shelters, soup kitchens, tons of partners.
Doña Ana County, we have a food insecurity rate that is higher than the national average. Why do you think that is? Do you have any explanation?
I think, the state overall definitely has a nation, a food insecurity rate that's higher than the nation's, but I think a lot of factors go into it. I think poverty and generational poverty are a large contributor to that. If you don't have enough food to make rent, right, you're going to squeeze the food budget first. That's the easiest one to really take from, rather than, going without shelter or medication, for example.
Mm-hmm. And I know you have, a bit of a public health background, correct?
Yeah.
So how does food insecurity affect us from that perspective, from that public health perspective?
There are multiple ways that it impacts our population overall, but in particular, food insecurity among children, as well as with those with chronic diseases, the impact on those two populations is probably the most concerning, because if you don't have enough food, you can't learn, you can't concentrate really, and with people who have chronic diseases like diabetes, heart conditions, hypertension, without food that is fresh and accessible, it's easy to see those conditions aggravated over time. And there is also a wealth of evidence indicating that food insecurity really impacts our health over the long term.
People may see people who are obese and things like that and think, oh, they're not food insecure, but how is it that food deserts and things do cause these issues like hypertension and heart problems and things like that?
Right. Researchers call it the obesity food insecurity paradox. Because, right, you wouldn't typically associate an obese person with food insecurity or an overweight person. But like I mentioned earlier, without access to fresh food, a lot of our constituents or populations they resort to processed foods, those that are really high in sugar and fat, and that leads to obesity and overweight folks. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, like we were saying, in New Mexico, there is a higher per capita population that is food insecure versus the rest of the nation. So how can the community get involved with, helping aid this issue?
I mean, I think there's something out there to help with food insecurity for everyone. I know that a lot of folks can think that there's nothing to do or their hands are tied, but there's always something that you can contribute, whether it's time or money or volunteering at your local food pantry. If you go to our website at www.rrfb.org, you can actually look up all of the partners that we have throughout the state and find a location that's close to you that you can go and contribute some time. And it's also helpful to just see people at the food pantry and remind them that they're just a part of your community, just like you are.
I know that the federal government is looking, once they get out of the August recess, that they're looking at the Farm Bill. So from your perspective, someone that works, within food insecurity, what would you like to see in the Farm Bill? What needs to be done on that federal level?
Quite a bit, right? But I think that the main things we want to see come from the Farm Bill this session is the restoration of SNAP, for example, to those pandemic levels. That was extremely helpful for families throughout the state and throughout the nation, really, to have those maximum benefit allotments available to them. And we see that more often than not, those the impacts from the pandemic haven't gone away. So families are still relying on SNAP benefits and federal nutrition programs to make it throughout the month. And when they can't, that's where we step in, and that's where our food pantry partners act as a supplement to that. But yeah, out of the Farm Bill, we would love to see those federal nutrition programs expanded, SNAP maximum benefit allotments restored, and no cuts, preferably.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So how do you feel, on a more local level, let's say citywide or statewide, do you feel like enough is being done in order to combat food insecurity?
I think I'm always humbled by the folks that I meet throughout the day. For example, we were in Cloudcroft yesterday doing a visit with a partner and seeing them outside. They were doing their distribution outside on the pavement, in heat, and they're out there every single month doing this distribution, and they're all seniors, right? So I think the generosity of the state is overwhelming, and while there always can be more done, definitely, that we've really stepped up to meet the need. I think in particular our legislators can take more notice of the poverty issues that are in their counties and the food insecurity issues that are in their county or areas. So
I know food waste is a big issue that in my reporting I've come across a lot. There are according to the USDA, there are billions of pounds of food that are wasted every year. So how can we combat that, and how does Roadrunner help deal with that?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's basically why we exist. Well, not the entire reason why we exist, but Roadrunner Food Bank saves millions of pounds of food from being destroyed per year. And what we do is we take those not so fresh looking strawberries or maybe the bananas that have a hint of black on them, and we rescue those from going into the landfill to then be distributed to people in need. So as a result of stores, increasing their efficiency and their bottom line, we have seen a drop in some of that donated produce and some of that food rescue that we rely on so heavily. But we're looking at other ways of shoring up our inventory, including purchasing from wholesalers. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I know we're running out of time a little bit here, but are there any other websites or links or information that you would like for our viewers or listeners to know about?
I would love to share out the hotline that we have on our website, and actually it's located at www.rfb.org. You'll see Find Help and then Find Food on that front screen, and anybody all over the state can put in their zip code, and they'll pull up the entire list of partners available in their area. So anybody in need can find food. There's no reason that anyone should be hungry in the state.
Shelby Koza is the regional manager for the Las Cruces Roadrunner Food Bank. Shelby, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks.
That's our time for now. Join us this week on KRWG Radio. Every weekday, it's morning edition 5 to 9, fresh air at 11, followed by Here and Now noon to 2, and All Things Considered 4 to 7. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org, and we'd like to hear from you, so email us with a story idea and video submissions. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu. For all of us at KRWG News, I'm Johnny Coker. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Newsmakers.